Now, on the face of it, 5-0 sounds bad. I hear you. I grant you. But somehow not feeling as terrible and hopeless this morning as scoreline would suggest. Maybe it's denial. First stage of grief. Second stage is anger. So tune in tomorrow. Dan McDonnell is with us. He was at Wembley last night. He'll check in very, very shortly. Damien Delaney was watching on like the rest of us. Thoughts to come from Damien. Conan is here. Hello. Happy Monday.
Hello, Joe. You've completely disarmed me. I thought we were going to come in here ranting and raving about a 5-0 loss.
Yeah, I know. I mean, maybe we should be, but just the first 50 minutes felt very, very promising. So ranting and raving maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow, yeah.
So a few things coming up today and this week, just to try and mark your cards. Second podcast today coming to a feed near you. Reflections from events in Arlington, Texas. Taylor Serrano hit the heights. Tyson versus Paul plummeted, perhaps even lower than we might have feared. Did you watch?
I watched afterwards when I woke up from a nice sleep. Yeah.
Sorry, no one watched live. No one's insane here.
I felt like I was admitting something there.
Thoroughly pointless exercise, the latter, whereas the former was very, very good. I mean, every bit as good as the first fight in Madison Square Garden. Degree of controversy to Taylor Serrano on two fronts. Taylor got the decision. Plenty of people think otherwise. And then there were accusations, mid-fight, by the way. They cut to Serrano's corner and the accusations of dirty tricks in the ring were very much at play. They were furious with Taylor's head movements, accusing her of headbutting and saying she has form in this regard. This is Katie Taylor for you, was basically the message. She's done it her whole career. Amanda's only had 2 cuts in 50 fights, both against Taylor. So that was quite on the nose. We'll talk about all that later on today. I mean, on commentary, Roy Jones Jr. was saying this does happen when Southpaw meets Orthodox.
Yeah.
And Taylor had the same explanation afterwards. I'd be more inclined to think that's 90% of it, with absolutely 10%. Can Taylor look after herself in there? Sure.
Yeah, and you know, like not getting cut in 50 fights isn't a smoking gun when you're fighting Katie Taylor then as well. Like, you know, taking out the head movements aside, you're very likely going to get cut when you're fighting Katie Taylor. So it's not really a really strong argument. The head movements were interesting. Like, I feel like I had to watch it a few times to see if it was actually happening. Like, you could see she is moving her head towards her, but it wasn't, wasn't like a stitch that you'd call it up north, like a complete neck movement towards her head.
Fell into her for one of the more pointed ones.
Yeah.
And then I thought, did she fall into her or did she fall into her? Obviously she's not going to throw a headbutt, so maybe that's how you do it. I'm not enough of an aficionado to know. It's not something I remember thinking about Taylor before ever.
No.
Or hearing about her.
Yeah.
But now, like, the boxing world at large is like Carl Froch was coming out saying she does do it. We all know she does this, so I'm not sure where the truth lies.
Like a Premier League manager trying to get inside a referee's head before a game as well. Like, was it Klopp that said about United? No, it was actually Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saying Liverpool getting too many penalties, and then they didn't get penalties in for months after that. So it does work on some fronts, so it'll be interesting to see what's to come of Katie Taylor. But the points thing as well sort of confuses me, because you see a lot of boxers rewatching the fight saying, I had Taylor unanimously as well, no issue. So it's sort of always, every time it's controversy, it feels like saying that's controversial too. It's never a complete definitive answer to who actually won points-wise.
Yeah. More of that later today. I would say in the next week, if we have time, or certainly next 2 weeks, I think a Rory McIlroy 2024 podcast is well worth doing. This has been one of the more eventful years of his rather eventful life. Yesterday, as is his way, he won the European Tour Order of Merit, best on tour across the year, the Race to Dubai as it's called now. He has done this 3 years in a row. Birdie on 16, birdie on 18, closed out the win. And that puts him level with Seve Ballesteros in doing it for the 6th time. And he's now very much chasing down Colin Montgomery's record of 8. A lot of people felt the 8 would never be caught. And so McIlroy's on the precipice now of doing it. And I would say he was as emotional afterwards as he's ever been after a big win.
It means a lot.
Gather yourself. I'll keep talking. You just take a deep breath.
Yeah. I've been through a lot this year, professionally, personally, and it feels like the fitting end to 2024. I've persevered this year a lot. Had close calls, wasn't able to get it done. Really pleased with the way I finished, and thankfully I hung on a tough day and got the job done.
Talked about those opportunities missed and how much they hurt you, and there was another one today that you really wanted to get. You said last year you stood on the green with one trophy and a Hoy Garden, you wanted both.
I was feeling it. I had chances. I had a chance on 10 that slipped by, a chance on 11, then I bogeyed 13. I had a 7-iron in my hand and 14 going into the par 5, only make a par there. So going into those last few holes, I knew I just needed something to happen, and the wedge shot to a foot on 16 was the catalyst I needed to push on and play those last couple of holes well.
You've won your 6th race to Dubai, equaling the legendary Severiano Ballesteros. Just describe the sense of achievement.
It's really cool. I think everyone knows what Sevi means to European golf, to Ryder Cup players. European Ryder Cup locker room, all we have are quotes of Sevi. We had a changing room with Sevi's shirt from '95, the last Ryder Cup he played. He means so much to European golf, and for me to be mentioned in the same breath, I'm very proud.
A lot going on there, I think.
Yeah. He's having a lot of releases this year.
Yeah. And, your references have been through a lot this year, professionally and personally. All that's, I'm sure, swirling around. And he is a golf historian, so when he talks about Ballesteros, he knows the Ballesteros achievements, and he knows the standing. And I guess it probably is a moment where you're like, God, I am now in the same breath as him. So we might talk about Rory's 2024 at some stage in the next week or so. On the rugby front, we're going to go deep in Ireland, Argentina. Tomorrow we'll do that. Fiji coming to town on Saturday. Ian Madigan, Keane Tracy will be with us. All our Autumn Nation Series coverage, of course, is with thanks to our friends at Energia, who sponsor Irish rugby at all levels. So that's coming your way tomorrow. We will also have an interview this week with Jenny Gow, recorded last week. She is the BBC Formula One journalist, over 200 Grand Prix to her name, to her career. She's on Drive to Survive. And 2 years ago, out of nowhere, just by dint of coughing too much, she was sick and just was coughing a lot. And she had a slight tear in a vessel in her neck and had a stroke, and is very much fighting to get her speech back to where it was. So we talked to Jenny about all of that. It's a really good chat. It's coming your way this week. And we also have a big interview that we're looking forward to on Thursday. More of that anon. Not going to jinx it. Now, that enough for you?
That's great, Joe.
So that's the shape of the week. Katie Taylor a little bit later on, but first, Damien Delaney to come, Dan McDonnell, and the football next. Dan, welcome.
Hi, Joe.
It was a tasty atmosphere last night. I was a little surprised. I had just thought, in light of several English players saying, well, obviously we don't need to play in these games, I thought the fans might follow suit. But no, it felt like close to full house, if not full house, and Wembley generally up for game in a big way.
Oh yeah, no, I think I did say it beforehand. It was starting to have that kind of atmosphere. 5 o'clock on a Sunday, perfectly set up. Let's be honest. I was in Germany during the summer. There was a portion of England fans who were on trains singing about the IRA and whatnot. So they were always going to show up for this game, and there was always going to be a tasty atmosphere. I mean, the anthems were booed for both the game. Sorry, both of the anthems were booed for the game in September. There was always going to be a reciprocal nature in terms of that. So, no, my feeling around the game was that the pre-match atmosphere would be brilliant, and then maybe the football would drain the life out of it. But instead, we did get a contest for 50 minutes.
Let me juxtapose two ends of the spectrum here. Craig Bellamy, of all people, Daniel. So he's had a very good start to his time as Welsh manager, now unbeaten in his first 5 games. They drew on Saturday night in Turkey. Here is Craig Bellamy spreading some love post-match. Have a listen to this.
A big thank you to everyone in Turkey, because to play here in this atmosphere, you're a credit. It's amazing. Like, as a football fan, passionate about football, to see your passion as well. I wish I could play here all the time. And the way you've treated us since we've been here is, again, I couldn't thank you enough. So, just like to say before we leave, head back to Cardiff. Very grateful for your hospitality and the city. You picked a really good city for the game. And good luck in the future as well.
Like, what kind of world are we living in where Bellamy and Turkey are conducting themselves like this, whereas a little reminder of the anthems last night at Wembley? Wouldn't even consider myself like especially patriotic. That is irritating me massively. The cheek. I'm no historian, but I feel we should be booing you should not be booing our anthem. I mean, if anybody here has cause to boo anthems, and they just absolutely loaded in on it. That's not just a few anti-IRA types. That's the whole stadium.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say at the Euros in the summer, I mean, they did also boo the Slovenia anthem partly as well. Like, I don't think they've colonized Slovenia at any point unless I've
well, who knows?
So,
who knows? Would you bet on it?
Possibly, they might have done it at some stage. But like, you know, this is the point. Like, it's just an angrier world now, Joe, as we know. Like, you know, it's an angrier world the last couple of years. I mean, I know from people who've covered the English beat, you know, that a lot of the sort of no surrender chants disappeared from the playlist for a period of time, but they've returned in the last couple of years. And like in the Euros and summer in general, there was a sort of a general hostility towards all anthems. Obviously, the fact that the Irish fans properly showed hostility in September, it was always going to go back the other way. And I don't particularly have a problem with that. I mean, obviously, I must admit now, when I saw the members of the military coming out before the game, there was like the pre-game pageantry, and obviously these members of the military coming out, and the Irish fans started booing, and I was like, they had some big sort of, they're about to roll something up, and I was convinced a giant poppy was about to be produced, but thankfully it was just an English flag or some FA flag or something. But no, that edge is there. Even in the second half, there was definitely a section trying to get a chant about James McClean going. They've come up with some James McClean related song. They couldn't get enough critical mass for it to be audible, but by, you know, from a wider number. But yeah, I'm not remotely surprised. It's a sort of a reflection of a lot of trends, and yeah, Craig Bellamy and Turkey spreading the love. That's a little bit of a plot twist. All right,
I mean, I'm
maybe.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, like sort of Graham Souness and Bellamy would have had a working relationship. You know, Souness sort of liked it out there, you know, planting flags and that type of thing. I mean, maybe Craig Bellamy long term is playing the long game there.
Maybe. The Irish fans or the English fans trying to come up with a McClean chant? Sorry.
Oh, the English fans. Sorry, there was a section of English fans trying to come up with a McClean chant. I don't want to use the words, but yeah, they were trying to come up with. They had a catchy tune, but it just didn't get enough. Didn't get enough people to go with it. But in some respects, is actually, in my view, it's almost a massive compliment to him. I mean, you're absolutely destroying Ireland, and you're still, in some ways, triggered by someone who's retired and is playing in League One at the moment, and yet he's still in your heads in some shape or form. I think that's actually a victory for James.
What do some of those words rhyme with that you don't want to say?
Well, no, it was more suggesting. There was sort of suggesting he could be a member of a paramilitary organisation, that type of thing. Okay. You know, but like I don't think James McClean would have a problem actually, really, with the chant being repeated. I'm just trying to show some degree of decorum. I also don't know what the full words was, but it was just inviting. I mean, I don't know, is this going to take off and they're going to be singing about James McClean in the coming years, which just, again, would be a terrific compliment.
Yes, that would be just so small time. I mean, you're just so far ahead of us on the football front to be worried about anything to do with us is really beneath where England are at the moment. Because I was there in 2013. That was the night Shane Long scored a header, and I remember very convivial atmosphere, friendly. Yeah. It is remarkable the change in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years for a multitude of reasons that are difficult to even diagnose. We could take a stab at it, but I think, in short, Angrier World is about it.
No, I think so. Yeah, no, it really is. And as I said, I've covered England at pretty much every tournament, with the exception of the COVID Euros, and the early 2010s. You are right, it was sort of a different vibe. Okay, some of those tournaments were further flung as well in terms of maybe who could travel, but definitely around Germany this summer. You could just, as much as it didn't spill over to anything dramatic, it's just more, as you know, it's just an angrier.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a post-Brexit world, but I mean, as I said, we don't want to diagnose it all now in the space of a couple of minutes. It's hard to go there.
It is difficult. London is one of those cities that can easily swallow up and digest an international football match. It's so big, but in so much of what you actually were able to observe, was there an edge outside of the stadium? Was this kind of lot of bark, no real bite, or was it a bit tetchy?
No, and I think that's actually a good point. I think it's a little bit like, in the same way that a lot of people maybe are like angrier online, I think maybe within the stadium is like a safe space for booing and chanting stuff. But I didn't pick up any real sense of an edge outside. I will say that, it's more almost the performative anger, in some respects, around the ground. I mean, I was writing in the preview about the game in '91, the last competitive game between the nations in a competitive game in Wembley. And I mean, there was 61 arrests before the game. There was a pub attacked in Kilburn, like bricks being thrown through windows. There was nothing like that. There was no sense of that. I was around the city for a while afterwards. It would have been a good bit after the crowd would have dispersed, but I have to say, no. Now, there may be anecdotal stories, people can tell me differently, but there was certainly no sense of carnage around the stadium. It was just more within it. It was never going to be, as you said, the respect for the anthems. And I do remember that 2013 game, that was part of the discussion around it, but I had no expectation it was going to be in any way diplomatic last night. No.
Well, I guess on the basis of what happened in September, it's a €10,000 fine each for FAI and the FA on the back of it. So that's the only real offshoot. Let's talk about the game. Heimir Hallgrímsson, speaking afterwards, said the following, Dan.
Well, I'm kind of lost for words. 6 minutes of kind of madness. It was a shock. Conceding a penalty, conceding a goal, losing a player. But we probably lost our heads at this moment, leading into a second goal and a third goal. And from there, you can see we maybe lost our head, gave up. We're struggling with confidence, and it clearly took away all confidence from what we did really well in the first half. You cannot explain things like this. It just happens, slap in the face, and it was difficult to come back from it. Excuses when you lose 5-0 is kind of pathetic. To be excusing or talking about positives is embarrassing to lose 5-0. Maybe it's too harsh to say give up, but like I said, it's easy to criticize when you're not playing the game. We had a game plan, it was working perfectly, and all of a sudden in 6 minutes, there's no way out. It's 3-0, one man down against a good team like England. So it's kind of a shock, and I didn't feel that we had any way out from there, and it was just limited damage as much as we could.
There is a chance he's going to put us all out of business if he keeps doing such brilliant analysis post games. Who needs the rest of the podcast?
I know. I mean, at one point, he in the press conference afterwards, he was like, I've written down the details here, and he proceeded to run through like the 52 to 58 minute collapse. Yeah, look, I mean, I think I spoke about it with Gary and Will on Friday, like that he is he's a good communicator, and he's quite concise after the game. And I did wonder like what his tone would be coming in, because look, there is, and I think he probably struck the right tone again, because it feels almost embarrassing after a 5-0 to start saying, well, what about the positives? Like, and I'm sure with Damien, you'll probably go through some of the detail of the first half, and there's probably interesting elements to it. But I think he struck the right tone about first saying, no, this is not good enough, or, the words that we've heard, words like pathetic. And he did say give up. And then as he said there, he was actually asked, when you say give up, what do you mean? And I think that is maybe one of those instances where, look, it's not his first language. Sometimes he can say things that are very blunt, and then he may not entirely have meant them in that way. And he said, maybe not give up. It is a little bit harsh, but I think he recognised the need to be out front and not trying to sort of polish the turd in a sort of a 5-0 defeat. Well, then later on saying, well, look, there are probably things from the first 50 minutes that you could be encouraged by. And I think at the end of the year, he won't see the players for 4 months now. So it's a tricky one, because you obviously, if you go too overboard, you're ending on that sour note. So, but yeah, I don't think anyone can argue too much with what he was saying afterwards, for sure.
So what's your interpretation of last night? Are you glass half full, glass half empty on this one?
Yeah, I think there is no doubt that it's worrying, the manner in which they lost all sense of their nerve after the goal. I mean, look, England were frustrated in the first half, and there was that sense of trying to maintain that. And all the chat last week was about, bad second halves and how to avoid the bad start to the second half. And unfortunately, it just switched off. And you watch that first goal back, and just Evan Ferguson, a simple pass from Mark McGuinness. They're frustrated with each other and they switch off. But to me, the slight worry would be that the England goals actually were set pieces. It was almost like that they were that mentally gone, that with 10 men, it's grand if you get done 3-on-2 and there's sort of goals that are a clear reflection of the numerical advantage. And I appreciate that the set piece opportunities and the corners they get are a product of that, but it's probably just the application for those, the second goal with sort of Collins and Cullen and yeah. But I have to say, I do take I will still, it reached a point at 3-0 where it's well, okay, you have to remember, this game doesn't actually matter to Ireland points wise. This is annoying and this is a little bit embarrassing, but actually there's no real implications for this now. I think probably on the morning of the game, probably would have gone there with little expectations. So I suppose in some ways, the fact that they did get that first half, the fact that he showed he could try something different with the Nathan Collins experiment, you can take something from that. I know Gary Breen was messaging me during the first half going, and he'd been critical of the performance on Thursday, and he was saying this is really impressive. The after 1 or 2 training sessions, the triggers, the press, how they manage that system, very, very good. So I think you can take something from that. But I guess when you go for an ultra defensive approach, it needs to be perfect. And the little things like the scales yellow, that builds up, to the second yellow, and just that casual start to the second half, that casual lead up to the goal. Unfortunately, if you play that way, it just needs to be absolutely spot on. But I'll take something from the first half still, as much as I said, like Heimir saying, you sort of feel a little bit silly after a 5-0 talking about defensive solidity. So
to wrap up where we are now, as you said, that's it for 4 months now. Next game will be promotion relegation playoff in March with a runner-up in League C. That could be Armenia, could be Slovakia, could be Bulgaria, could be Kosovo. There's a situation from Friday to unravel. Yeah. They walked off during a game on Friday. There are games this evening, so we'll know in due course. But that will be doubleheader in March, promotion relegation playoff, and then obviously World Cup draw to follow. And again, I heard a few people over the weekend saying, wouldn't be the worst thing if we got relegated to League C and we can find our feet a touch and build confidence against lesser opposition. Ordinarily, you might agree with that, but with a view to making the Euros in 2028, being in League B would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, and it looks like Northern Ireland are going to get promoted. So, we would be the only host nation, such as Northern Ireland are host nations. I mean, that's obviously a debate. We were the only one in League C. So I still think I want to avoid that, even though the criteria are unclear. But yeah, we will actually have the World Cup draw on December the 13th. We'll have an idea of what the year is going to hold, but it's going to be ravaged with sort of clauses and permutations because of because of the Nations League, the expanded Nations League format. I'm not going to get into it now; it's just complicated enough. But really, as Heimir spoke about it, it is quite likely now that Ireland's World Cup campaign is going to be 2 games in September, 2 games in October, and 2 games in November next year, with 2 higher ranked nations in a 4-team group. So I think his point is, I think the games in March, I think it might be more like Finland in terms of the approach. I get try and go and win a game maybe. I think the question mark from yesterday going forward is, next September, October against Ireland's top seeds, will you see something approaching the setup yesterday? And as I said, I'd be interested to hear your chat with Damien about Nathan Collins and how that might work against a different type of opponent. Obviously, England, Harry Kane is dropping in, and it was actually very specific for England, maybe. But I wonder, will we see something like that again? Because I guess his argument is Ireland needed to find a way to get results against higher ranked teams. He's clearly shown he's going to try something different to try and do that. And does the second half undo the good work of the first? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure it does, I have to say. I thought it was very encouraging in many ways. Dan, thank you so much. Did you, by the way, were you suitably hang on a second, did you boo the English national anthem then from the press box?
I did not boo the English national anthem. I am a little bit, the whole military stuff, I do find it a little bit... it's a bit
on the nose, isn't it?
Well, Aidan Fitzmaurice put out a tweet that sort of went pretty viral, just pointing out that the FAI in 2016 were fined for an Easter Rising, some kind of Easter Rising commemoration on a shirt. And obviously, if you produce a Palestine flag, you'll be fine. It's a political act. Obviously, to a lot of people, without going down a particular road here, the military regalia at an England game could be quite offensive to people, So
well, I think when you take James McLean's very fair observation that this Remembrance Month almost at this stage, but Remembrance Sunday and the Poppy, it has broadened out past World War I, World War II. It's now just for the British troops at large. And obviously that does become a more contentious issue straight away. That's a more politicised issue straight away. Yeah,
it does feel like, if you're like England, just, powerful nation within UEFA, they can do things on their terms. And it's not really my sense to get riled by that. But I must admit, you are just before the game going thinking, you're playing Ireland in November. Maybe you just tone it down for this particular game. I think there was some unnecessary inflamed tensions there, I would say too. But no, I wasn't booing Joe, to be clear. I always keep my emotions in check in a press box area, of course, like a true pro.
Thanks, Dan.
See ya.
Damien, hello.
Morning, Joe. How are you?
Very well. So I might just start with some thoughts from Ireland's most brutal pundit. He's new on the scene and he's making a splash. His name is Heimir. So fresh from being lucky against Finland, he was saying things like, we're not talking about positives. It's embarrassing to lose 5-0. We lost our heads leading into second and third goals, lost our heads, gave up. And then he was asked about, God, you gave up? And he sort of clarified. He said, okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. But he was certainly not sitting there going, come on, did you see the first half? That was good. He was far more in the 5-0. It's pathetic to make any excuses. So that was a sense of Heimir.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm really pleased to hear it, that he's been absolutely honest. That was a brilliant encapsulation of the night. I listened to his post-match press conference. I think he got it spot on. It just shows that you can be honest in interviews without, in inverted commas, losing the players. He didn't dig anyone out individually, and I think he called it spot on. And I do like listening to him. I must say that.
That's an interesting point about losing the players. So that is the big fear any manager has. I suspect Stephen Kenny at all points was thinking, I'm going to defend the players in public at all costs. And then it became sort of defending himself and his record, and that became a touch more difficult. But you don't think, being a former player, players would hear what Hal Grimson said last night and spit the dummy out and think that's OTT?
No. Do you know why, Joe? Because it was the truth. And I think every one of those players in that change room is honest enough to know, Jesus, that wasn't great. And every one of those players have been sitting afterwards going, what the hell happened? I mean, just to go back to what you just said there, a lot of the time under the previous manager, I would imagine players are sitting in that changing room and they go on the bus afterwards and they listen to the manager's press conference. They're going, were we good? I didn't feel like we were good today, and you're kind of going, that's strange. Like, and it wouldn't tally. A lot of those players will be honest. I mean, 99% of professional footballers are brutally honest in their self-assessment and in their overall assessment. They're not deluded. They don't hide behind statistics or anything like that. So they knew it, and they will take that one on the chin and fully accept it. And I'm sure that saying the quiet part out loud, that it wasn't a good night, is healthy, if I'm being honest with you.
Well, let's follow Heimir's approach here and go to the bad aspects. That 8-minute spell where they concede 3 goals.
Not great. No, look, like, it happened quick. Like, it happened so quick. I mean, my God, the Scales penalty, the giving away the penalty, the red card, goal going in. What was interesting is that all the other goals pretty much came from set plays, which wasn't indicative of the fact that we were down to 10 men and we got dragged all over the place and opened up and ripped apart. It was set plays, which just means that, like, we got clipped, we were stunned, we were seeing stars for a little bit, and England just absolutely put us to bed as a world-class top team, top international ranked team does do that. I suppose when, speaking from my own point of view, when you're playing in a team and something goes against you, right? Let's say, and listen, we've all had teams where we're playing well, all of a sudden penalty goes against you. There has to be a steeliness, especially coming from senior players, leaders in the pitch, just to tell everyone, hey, it doesn't matter. We're still a top team, and there's a grit and a determination that, like, we don't care. Okay, that ref, we worry about it afterwards. We're going to batten down the hatches here, and we're going to grind our way back into this game, and we're going to take a draw out of this, or we're going to maybe go on and win it, right? And that comes from teams that are battle hardened, that are confident, that are happy with themselves, or in a good place mentally. What you saw last night is a team that is not in a good place mentally. A team that has been getting battered for 3 or 4 years. Not battered, that's unfair, but getting beat off really poor teams. The Luxembourg game has effect on you. Azerbaijan, Armenia, only beating Gibraltar twice in a certain spell. I'm not going back over all the statistics, but, Scotland were the only team that we beat that were of any note in 4.5 years. That takes its toll. It really does. When you're not in a positive mindset, and this ties back to what I said to you at the top of the show, the players are honest enough to know after a lot of those games, they're flying back or they're heading back to their clubs and they're going, geez, that wasn't good. Even though there's a certain spin being put on the performance, there's a certain cherry picking of statistics, that wasn't good. And I think that takes its toll mentally on these players. And I suppose when you look back at the manager's commented before he started, jersey seems to be a little bit too heavy for certain players. I think that's what he's talking about, that they're coming into camp you look forward to it because it's your country, but you're not like going, oh my God, this is going to be tough. I'm not looking forward to this. I'm going to come in and do my best, but there's a certain mindset there, and he's trying to snap that. And I felt that the 2 wins against Finland were hugely important. The first 50 minutes against England were hugely important. But my God, when the first thing went wrong, the wheels just came screeching off. And that's a difficult thing to fix, especially that because that game was in the UK last night, all those players would have went their separate ways from Wembley. I'm assuming, they might have went back to the hotel for something to eat, but then they've all would have went their separate ways. So there's no debrief, there's no Monday morning debrief, as you would say. So I think for him now, moving forward in the next few months until March, I think he's got to get to the UK and meet these players. I do. I really think he's got to fly into the UK and go around and spend some time with these guys, because if the next time he sees them is March, all that psychological damage that we're talking about has bedded in, So I think in the next few weeks, he's got to get over to the UK, have dinner with these guys, have lunch with these guys, not in a training ground situation, but just sit down and talk to them and just try and instill, especially your senior players, your important players, pretty much everyone, I would imagine, that he feels has an influence on that changing room. And if I was a manager, that's all I'd be doing now. And not to pull out a laptop and show clips or to, possibly you could do that, but just sit down and speak to them and say, listen, that wasn't good, but we need to switch this around, and just ignite a fire in a few guys' bellies and get them moving.
And so what kind of other things would you like him to say? What would you be saying to some of these players? Say you're sitting down with Nathan Collins in a week. Yeah,
you're a huge influence on this changing room. When something like what happens against England, you're the guy that everyone looks to. You're the one wearing the armband. You're a senior player. You're a Premier League player. The younger ones are looking to you for guidance. What you do in the exact instance that penalty goes in has a huge effect on what the team does. And if fellas look at you and your hands are on your head, or your head is down, or you're not vocal, or you're not rallying the troops, or you're not effing and blind and saying, F this, we robbed of a penalty, let's do this, lads. I'm not having this, I'm not accepting this. That's what the senior players do. That's what, when something goes against you. And so you need him to be stronger, to be real. And listen, the term leadership gets banded around, and that's leadership. In that moment, like you setting the tone straight away, something's gone against us, I'm not having this, I'm not standing for this. And then you start getting into lads and rallying the troops and getting their spirits up and getting that dogs of war mentality into your team on the spot. That's what I would be asking from my leaders in that group. And Nathan is absolutely one of those. He's obviously had a super role last night in what he did for Ireland. And listen, I'm not in the inside of the squad, so I don't know who the senior players are, who the vocal figures are, who the characters are. There'll be 5 or 6. There's 5 or 6 in every group. And I think you would be meeting with them. And if you could change their mindsets and get them back to where they need to be, you'll drag the others with you. Okay, very interesting. And do you subscribe as well to, like, I dare say a lot of people watching last night would have said, get someone go down injured, take the sting out of it. Is that part of the game too? Well, it can do, but I mean, at the same point, you shouldn't need to do that. There's nothing wrong with it, but it looks a bit strange. But at the same point, I just think that there's a feeling, it's even a look, because I promise you, when that penalty goes in, a lot of lads would look to the senior lads, right? And you're looking for leadership, you're looking for, what do we do here now? Especially the younger ones, the ones that wouldn't be as experienced. You're at Wembley, you're playing against England, you've had a brilliant 50 minutes, you've robbed of a penalty. So you kind of feel like, the world is against us here, it's not our night. Yeah. And it just feels like that our shoulders went over, and then the set plays goals go in. Like I said, if England changed formation quickly, worked the ball from one side of the pitch to the other, stripped us, I would go, geez, that was good. But it was set plays, or the basis of set plays, which just means that, like, Nathan came out for the first one, hit it off Cullen. So what I'm saying is, it's in that immediate moment, it's fight or flight, isn't it? Like that's essentially what it is. And I've been in teams where you just everyone goes off. Yeah. So here we go again. Yeah. You know what I mean? This, or you get fellas that look and you go, right, I'm not having this, lads. Absolutely not. And you get back down the hatches. Because I think that's a really brilliant insight. And I felt what was almost going through their minds as well was the Ferguson penalty appeal aside, we actually haven't had a sniff here. We're not going to score. The best we're going to manage is a 0-0. Now our man off, 1-0 down. We're done. That was the read. That was how it felt. And maybe there's a kind of realism to that assessment. Me on the couch, I'm allowed to think that 1-0 down, we're unlikely to score. That's the game gone. But your point is, like, out in the pitch is not the place for realism. It's about getting a little bit angry at the situation. Yeah. Dogs of war, and we're not having this, to use your phrase. Yeah, like I agree. And listen, people will always say it's defeatist, but realistically, heading into the England game last night, what are you thinking? The result is out of our control. It really is, because they're such a good team, right? And that's not that's realism that you're talking about. So you're going, right, what are we looking for from the game tonight? We're looking for a performance, we're looking for positives, and we're looking to maybe get a potentially a draw if things go our way. But again, if England show up and they're in their fluent best, it's going to be difficult to stop them. I thought what the manager did last night, he deserves an awful lot of credit for the setup of the team. Yeah, it was incredible. It really, really was. And I'm really upset for him that he showed his hand, his ability, his kind of ability to adapt and create something in 2 days that worked beautifully. I done the Greece game against England, and England absolutely torched Greece in and out of possession. They absolutely torched them. And they're a very, very good Greek team. That first 50 minutes, we were starting to frustrate England, and they were struggling for answers. I think I spoke to you before about players figuring out what the opposition are doing very, very quickly, and being able to sort it out themselves. Like England were struggling, that formation and what Nathan Collins wrote. So that's the positive out of it. And I think anything that happens after that is a mentality issue. Okay, well, we'll talk about the first 50 minutes and just one more question. I just want to ask you, so Didi Hamann was saying something similar to you on RTE last night, and the word he used about the team, and he was talking about the stupidity of the Scales' first yellow, for instance, but he was also talking about the reaction as soon as they went 1-0 down. He said this team need to mature.
That was his word. They need to mature, and I think that's a good maybe summation of the journey they need to go on, because they've just been so kind of callow, and they're not like men's football. The things you're talking about. So do you think? And it's hard to answer this question because you're not on the inside. You don't know them as people, but just based on what you're observing, do you think it's in them? Do you think this is a team that can mature and can get to that point? Or do you have, does 10% of you have a worry that this team may just not ever be that team? Like, not all teams have it in them to do the roll up the sleeves, we've got a man and a goal down, let's go, we're angry. That'd be a question mark, I'd say. I'm not sure if in 3-4 years this team will ever have the roll up the sleeves mentality. I certainly hope they do, and I hope it's a case of maturing. But do you have that worry it mightn't be in them?
If it's not in them, that's the manager's job. That's the role of the manager, is to instill that in the players, and that takes time. If it comes into a club situation, you're working with lads every day, you can instill that very much quicker. You and me have spoke at length about teams before, Joe, and I said to you several times before, teams are a physical representation of the manager. Always. Whatever the manager's person, you watch it all the time. Look at managers' personalities. Managers are up and at 'em and aggressive. They got up and at it and aggressive teams. If they've got quiet, softly spoken managers, they could be good footballing teams. But teams take on the personality of the manager because they're listening to that same voice every day. It's a one voice thing. And if the manager is putting words into the ether of what he wants his team to be, the team will become that. The team can morph into what the manager's looking for. There's players with character in the Ireland team, there's no doubt. You just go through it. Cuivine's a character. Yes, he's a very quiet guy, but he's a different type of leader in terms of what he does with his calm demeanour. You understand? So he's a good example to people, not to panic, diligently going about his job, not shouting and screaming. Nathan is playing in the Premier League every week. He absolutely has it in him. He wouldn't have the armband otherwise. You look through that midfield, Josh Cullen, I reckon, is one of those types. Okay, people can criticise him for lack of technical or whatever people want to, but he looks like one of those dogs of war guys. He looks like a guy that can grow into that role. So the manager needs to identify it. I think Malumbi is similar. Not everybody has to be in a starting 11. So the morale or the mentality of the team gets set on the training ground, and he needs time to instill that. But the problem he's having now is he's trying to undo a lot of the scar tissue in a short amount of time. He's only had the job. And listen, the first 2 games he kind of passed up as a spectator, and he admitted that himself. He's probably regretting that now. So essentially, he's only had 4 games since he's been involved. Very short amount of time to work with players, which is why I said, thinking about it last night driving down in the car, I think he needs to get to the UK.
No, it's a point well made. So that's suitably honest, and we've gone over the negatives. I come away from last night feeling really good. It's the strange thing. I really do. So talk to us about the first 50.
Oh, thank God. I did as well. Listen, when I woke up this morning, I was thinking, geez, 5-0. But I'm optimistic. This guy has shown me enough in the short spell of time that he's been in charge on the pitch, and he's shown me enough in his interviews that he understands the problem. He sees the issue. Now, can he write it or not, or how quickly he can write those issues is another thing to be seen. But the Nathan Collins thing was a thing of beauty. And I love my technical stuff, Joe. And when the game kicked off last night, I was thinking, Nathan Collins in midfield. And I was thinking, is he still going with a 4-4-2? And it ended up being like a 4-5-1. Right, where do we start with this? So 4-4-2, the benefits of 4-4-2 is you have a fullback and a wide player on either side. So your flanks are secure because you have 2 players there to defend the flanks. You have 2 players up front. So we saw the benefits of that in the Finland game when the ball went forward, the ball got flicked on, and the lads chased it down, and we caused Finland some problems. Okay. The negative or the con of that formation is you've only got 2 in midfield, and Finland exposed our lack of numbers in the middle of the park. Right. So when Jason Knight went off pressing, Finland bypassed it. All of a sudden, Josh Cullen is in the middle on his own, and huge amount of space. Nobody can deal with that. It's not a slight on Josh Cullen at all. That's impossible to deal with. So we always feel like we want to play with 2 up front, and we want to have 3 in midfield. And then that kind of leads you on to we have 3 at the back as well, because it gives us a lot of solidity, and the formation sort of takes shape itself. But then the problem is you were left exposed on the wings because you only have 1 wing back on the outside. So when you play 3-5-2, you only have a wing back on the outside. So what that system did brilliantly is that when England were in the middle third, Nathan Collins played in the middle third, we had the extra body we needed. It was a 4-5-1 or a 4-4-2 if Scottish decided to go up front. When England, and the trigger for him to drop in at centre-back was a territory thing. When England got into the Irish defensive third, we needed our extra body in the centre-back then. So we got the comfort of having 3 centre-backs. So it was a really well-designed, really cleverly thought out and really well executed. And England were struggling. So when Nathan Collins dropped in to the middle to make it, so he became the middle of the 3 centre-backs, what it did beautifully was it allowed Liam Scales to release and go and help the full-back. It allowed McGuinness to release and go and help the opposite full-back. So if you were playing, let's say, a 4-4-2 and, you know, England are attacking down the side with, say, Livramento and Anthony Gordon or Madueke, then, you know, you could get overloaded in the wide areas. You know, your wide player goes back and all of a sudden the midfield player has to come up because you ideally you wouldn't want your centre-back going out to help your full-back because that would create a huge chasm between Liam Scales and McGuinness, right? And then England would flood runners into those spaces and they would, like, take us apart. So Nathan Collins filling that space brilliantly allowed Scales to go out and help our left back, O'Dowda. So when you had Madueke or Livramento, or on the other side it was Gordon and Kyle Walker. What was the fullback? It was Kyle Walker. So it allowed the best of both formations when they were required. That's probably the best way I could put it. I don't know if I explained that adequately, Joe. There, it sounded good in my head, but I'm not sure if that came out right.
It absolutely did. I remember we spoke after the Greece game away, and Ireland that night tried to kind of go 4-4-2 territory or 4-5-1 and even in a low block, and still it wasn't working. Greece were causing havoc. And I remember you and Gary Breen, we talked the next day and you said, well, look, that back four just dropped too deep off the Irish midfield, and so there were pockets aplenty. And watching last night, I mean, so I had that in my mind because I was like, well, let's you know, the guys were, I think, spot on in that. Let's see if Heimir Hallgrimsson addresses that. I mean, the spacing of the team was just so good. Like it was Arrigo Sacchi. They were like, they had the ropes. They were all connected, and at times, you know, really compact. So, like, that side of the thing was good. I thought Collins really enjoyed the role. I thought he was so engaged in the game. He was so concentrated. Like he, you know, maybe he's such a good player at the back four, he loses concentration at times, but he was so, like, picking his moments and seemed to be doing it really well. But the overriding sense was, Damien, that was one of the first times I'd seen the team grow in belief. Too often we would start games over the last couple of years and we'd have a plan and it would work for 5 minutes and then the opposition would work it out and then we were just done. You know, that was like a thing I felt for a lot of Irish games. Whereas last night, I was about 15, 20 minutes in, I thought it was lovely to look at the likes of Cullen and Malumbi, who have spent a lot of their Irish careers like scurrying to cover spaces that are just too big. And you looked at the team and I could sense they all felt, we're all in touch with each other. This is working. This is working. You know, it was like a kind of, they grew in confidence with the system.
Yeah, that's spot on. And the reason was Nathan Collins and really, really good by him. But that's not an easy role to do.
I'll bet.
Especially with 2 days run into it. The discipline and concentration that he has to have to know when he needs to be in midfield and when he needs to be the centre-back. There was a point in the first half where McGuinness got dragged out and he absolutely busted gut and filled a hole and cut a ball out at the near post. It was a near certain goal. Yeah. So the concentration levels from him, but the system. So if we played, say, England previously, we would have gone 4-4-2. England would have dominated the ball because we only had 2 in the middle of the park, and we would have got pinned in, pushed deeper and deeper and deeper, and England would have set up camp on the edge of our 18-yard box, and it was just a matter of time. Now, you hope for a counter-attack, you hope for something good, but eventually you're just lambs to the slaughter. That's what it is. So to get the third player in midfield gave Cullen and Malumbi the ability to go and press Curtis Jones and Conor Gallagher without leaving that pocket of space behind that we saw against Finland when Jason Knight ran off and did it. So all of a sudden now we're stifling England by clogging up the middle of the park. And you're going, okay, England are going, okay, fine, we're going to go wide. As soon as the ball went wide, Nathan Collins went into centre-back, Liam Scales went out and helped the full-back. So now all of a sudden England are getting clogged up in the wide areas. And then when they come back to point, Nathan Collins goes back into midfield. And I'm pretty sure the England players are looking at each other going, have they got 11 men on the pitch? Because it kind of feels like they've got 12. Because if you play with 3 centre-backs, 3 in midfield and 2 up front, the space has to be wide, right? Because that means you're playing 3-5-2. So if we get the ball wide, our wide player and our full-back will overload their wing-back and we'll have joy in the wide areas, right? So 4-4-2, you're going, well, they're going to clog us up in the wide areas because they have a full-back and a wide player, but we come back in the middle of the park. They only have two. We'll outnumber them there. But the role by Collins, I got really excited when I saw it was unfolding in the first 10 minutes. I was on my feet looking at it going, this is a thing of beauty. It is beautifully designed, really well thought out and really well executed. And it was just a shame. Now, what I will say is you have to give credit to Harry Kane for the pass for the penalty. I mean, like, oh my goodness. I watched that on replay and like watch where Jude Bellingham starts and watch where he gets the ball. And like it's like a quarterback and a wide receiver. You know, when the ball is thrown and it's in the air for 4 or 5 seconds and you're thinking, geez, that timing is incredible. It was that good. And I don't blame Liam Scales for getting caught out because I was watching on the TV from the high angle and I didn't see that pass. So at eye level, at pitch level, there's no way he'd have seen it. Harry Kane put that in a window of about a 2-yard by 2-yard window, and he put it there with the correct pace to marry up with Bellingham's run, and then he just chops back inside. So that's just one of those moments where you're playing against, by the way, there's probably only 1 or 2 teams, 3 teams in the world that could do that to you, or 2 or 3 players. So you're not going to come up against that every week. Sometimes you just got to, and I used to always say this to myself, sometimes you just got to hold your hands up. You know, you can berate yourself and argue with yourself and I should have been here or maybe I should have seen that. And I think it's a good skill in life sometimes just to shrug your shoulders and go, fair enough, well done.
Well, it's nice to be undone by a moment of borderline genius. Then, they took us apart there, which happened at the Aviva in September where they just pulled us apart.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why up to the 50th minute, I would give them credit that we forced England to do something like that to get their first effort on goal, which, by the way, was a penalty.
Yeah. That'll
tell you how good that first 50 minutes was. But it's always that hanging thing in the back of my head, Joe. we're quite happy this morning, but then it's 5-0. So it's kind of always just floating around here on the outside.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too excited because people will say that I'm deluded.
No, they won't. They won't.
Yeah.
People are smart. They understand the nuance of what happened. And they understand the critique of the team when things did go against them. You can't fold. Like, that is a worry. But that speaks really well of the manager, no? That he dreamt this up. He looked at what happened obviously in September where England just like cut through Ireland's midfield and like both dreamt it up and managed to communicate it well enough to the team that they got it and were able to implement it and it worked. So I mean that is something they can go to against better teams, I would think, fairly routinely now. England in particular love that space, obviously Kane and Bellingham and others, that kind of pocket in front of the back four. But like most good teams do, so that's going to be something they're going to be able to have in their back pocket now. And it wasn't, by the way, I presume, that's not just like, oh, this is some weird tactic that like you caught us on the hop. The way you've described it, just with the physics at play, just the numbers are in your favour. So even if teams now look at that game last night and know Ireland are potentially going to do this, it's still not going to be easy for them to play against.
Absolutely. That's good. That's a very valid point, Joe. Well done. I actually thought the same thing.
Don't say well done to me like you're patronising.
No, honestly, honestly.
I feel like I've just hit a good drive and you're saying that's not bad. Now watch this.
No, I didn't. No. What I'm saying is that's the natural conclusion because ordinarily, you're right. You're so right. When somebody does something that's quirky or something that's different, it can work the first time out because the team you're playing against aren't prepared for it and they can't figure it out. But the analysts of the team that you're playing next week will be pouring over that and they go, oh, that was really clever, well done. We're just going to counteract that now and we're going to, it's quite difficult to do that. So that's why I said that is a really good thought. You say that they're just that you thought that it was born out of the England game. I think it was born out of the Finland game on whatever night it was. What night was it? Thursday?
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Thursday?
Okay, because I think it was. They cut us open.
I think it was because when I watched that game, right, all the good stuff that we had in that game was in the wide areas and up front. Smodic running in behind, think of the disallowed goal. There was so much good. And I was like, Jesus, there's so much good in that performance. But there's a reason we don't play that system. Nobody plays that system anymore in its current fashion, or its old fashion. Sorry, like I said to you before, there's a reason nobody plays an orthodox 3-5-2 anymore. Yes, people are playing it, but it's very, very new aged. Think Inter Milan with Bastoni, Acerbi, DeMarco, Dumfries. It is loose. It's not an orthodox 3-5-2 because an orthodox 3-5-2 or an old-fashioned 3-5-2 can get taken apart the same way an old-fashioned 4-4-2 because teams will realise you're short in the middle of the park and they'll overload you in there and they'll just get the better of you eventually. So I think And sometimes the most beautiful things are the most simplest things. And I didn't come to this conclusion. So that's why I have a lot of respect for the manager. Sometimes he looked at it and he went, what were the best parts of the game on Tuesday night or Thursday night against Finland? Well, Festi was having joy. Mikey Johnson was having joy. We looked really, really solid in the wide areas. The back four, which, by the way, is another thing that we should probably mention. Since we went to back four, we look an awful lot better. What were the weak spots? We got absolutely cleaned out in the middle of the park. Well, I want to keep the good bits. And how do we cover up the weak bits? And then the simplicity of like what he did. And sometimes the best solutions are the most simplest ones, and they're the ones staring you in the face. Not that it's easy, by the way, it's not.
No.
What he came up with was brilliant.
Okay, feeling a lot better.
I am as well, Chuck. Thanks. Are we the only two deluded people?
I don't think so. I mean, I look forward to the emails in. Hit us, and if we're in denial, then by all means, indosportpodcast@independent.ie, and I'll read them out during the week.
If you and me are still having this conversation in 12 months' time, then I think we would be in denial. I think, if we're sitting here going, oh, he's brilliant, but we keep losing games of football and he hasn't got it right and he's still trying these things, then I think you're right to say. But I think the initial signs are quite good. And I think every interview he gives, I'm like, fair play to you, man. That's it in a nutshell. Well done.
That is us in a nutshell. Damien, hey, listen, that was really good. Well done. Well done. You had some good thoughts there. Some real big boy thoughts.
Well done, little buddy.
Thanks so much. Talk to you later.
Cheers, Joe. Thanks, man.